Ask the Mayor. Your chance to ask the Mayor of Weymouth, Bob Hedlund, questions about the town of Weymouth and or anything else that you have concerns about. Ask the Mayor is pre-recorded. And now, here's Bob Hedlund.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask the Mayor. Thanks for joining us here. This is the chance for you to ask questions of your mayor, me, Bob Hedlund. You can contact us at bob@gmail.com or check us out on Facebook, Bob Hedlund Mayor, and you can reach us there also. So as you can see, the one-time substitute citizen advocate / inquisitor is back with us, filling in for Jim Melody, and this is on an interim basis, as he will be joining us later in the show and momentarily. So for those fans of Jim, sit tight, don't change the station, he'll be here in a minute. We know he's the real anchor of this show and the big ratings draw. But we thought we'd have Mary sit in and maybe take a couple questions while we wait for Jim. And I will start.
Oh, this is interesting.
Actually, you're supposed to ask me questions. Is that how this show works? Is that how it works? Okay. Well, I think we have our first question right here, Mary.
What is it?
Do you need your bifocals, or can you read that?
Bob from 75 Middle Street wants to know, why is WETC moving from Channel 11 to Channel 8? Why?
Is the emphasis on there?
Why?
That is a really good question, Mary, and I think I've had a pretty good track record on this show of answering questions, most extemporaneously, as we really do not prep for the show. I like the spontaneity of the questions that Inquisitor Melody provides. However, in this instance, I really cannot provide an answer to the viewers, and what a coincidence that you would be sitting in this chair right now. Would you happen to be able to provide any insight as to why Channel 11 was showing Sesame Street this morning rather than a ratings draw like Ask the Mayor or Mayor's Monthly Forum or one of the school committee meetings or some of the other things that you're covering? Why are we moving down the dial, so to speak?
Well, I believe it's a Comcast situation, and Comcast can...
There's dirty words around here.
I know. So Comcast has asked us, or they can move our channel locations. A few years ago, when we first started community access over at the Pratt, that was Channel 10 and we were Channel 11. A few years ago, they went to Channel 9. And now Comcast has asked Channel 11 to go to Channel 8. What's replaced us is Providence PBS station.
Oh, and was the Providence PBS station unavailable on our system prior to this?
I'm not aware.
I don't remember seeing the Providence. I know I could get, I think on our system, a public station out of New Hampshire at times, right? Which is actually, I think GBH broadcasts that, is affiliated with a New Hampshire one. I don't know if they were involved with Providence. Interesting. Okay. So that explains Sesame Street this morning.
Right, but as the local nonprofit, we are at the whim, I don't want to say the whim, of Comcast. They can decide where our channel location is.
Guess what? I'm somewhat at the whim of Comcast as the mayor of the city also. I don't have a lot of options when it comes to providing cable service to the residents of Weymouth. I think we're in the second year of a 10-year contract, I think, that I inherited coming in. Do you want to elaborate on how that works, since you're kind of an expert on all things cable?
Well, Comcast signs a 10-year contract. The first one was 15 years. WETC was created out of the second one, which occurred in 1996. In 2003, Mayor Madden at the time approached us about Comcast surrendering local access television, which you remember I used to videotape you on Moore Road years ago. And so as part of that deal, we got a little bit more funding from Comcast to take on the public access, and we have since been housed. Our public access facility has been in the basement of the Pratt Library for many years. And WETC switched its original role as an educational program where we did a lot of programs with police, fire, schools. Now we've added, with you, a lot more government, less of the ed.
Right.
So
you guys have been doing great. We've added, since I became mayor, why don't you run down the government meetings we've been covering that traditionally hadn't been covered here? Talk
sure.
about that.
So we originally started off contractually with town council, and school committee was added a few years later. And now we do we wired up McCulloch,
So we're covering licensing, which hadn't been covered, right?
No, actually licensing.
Licensing was
in the
because
mix.
it was in the chambers.
And it was very convenient.
So school building committee we're covering.
Yes.
Conservation Commission we're covering. That hadn't been covered before. And most
Correct.
importantly, the Board of Zoning Appeals, which
Unbelievable.
people don't understand, or maybe they do understand, many people do understand how important a board that is, and we hadn't been covering it.
I would say that's actually one of our most watched online.
Right. So I know that our regular inquisitor has arrived, and I'll just say this, the issue of Comcast, probably the most frequently asked question I get as mayor, or one of the most frequently asked questions I get as mayor on this show, on social media, and as I travel around town is, why can't we get Vios in town? And
Yeah, so-
I can answer that.
Okay.
I mean, I've actually had the vice president of Verizon in here, and they flat out said, don't take it personally, Weymouth. We're not wiring any community in Massachusetts.
Right.
They're not doing it. There's some other emerging technologies that may provide an alternative down the road that we've had some discussions on some folks, but I don't know how far down the road that is. And I just heard a thing, I don't know if this is accurate or not, I don't want to be spreading rumors on the airwaves of WETC, but I heard that Verizon is getting out of their email business or something.
I don't know.
I just heard that recently. That may not be true.
I do know that the polls are the biggest issues with bringing in an additional provider. So Comcast basically has the rules of the polls. It would be very difficult for
Vios would have a right to those polls, but there's some. It's basically a cost issue, to wire the town. They would have to run their own
Right,
dedicated
stuff.
cable. They would have some access to the polls, but
Sure.
anyway.
But it's an expensive enterprise for any startup. So a lot of times I see online people say we need a Beld in this town. That's great, but it's not probably going to happen.
It's probably not going to happen. Anyway, we thank you for clarifying the move
Thank
from
you.
channel
I can't
11
wait to
to
step
channel
down.
8, and hopefully folks are following us there.
Okay, great.
And welcome back to Ask the Mayor. I'm Mary Heinrich. No, actually, I'm Jim Melody. Mary's a tough act to follow, I think we'd all agree, Mayor. And I appreciate Mary pitching in as I battled the Weymouth traffic. There's more construction going on in this town these days, Mayor, than who knows what. Road construction, building construction. It's an exciting time in the town. Wouldn't you agree?
Actually, we filmed a segment this morning, Jim, with WETC, talking about some of the projects and park improvements, things like that, with Steve Riley, our rec director, and Bob Luongo, our planning department director. So
Wow.
those will be running maybe following this show or prior to this show at some point.
Well, lots going on, and I wanted to comment on the coverage that Weymouth ETC offers the local community. I happened to be enjoying breakfast a couple weeks ago when the high school graduation was being broadcast live. The quality of the production, the coverage, honest to gosh, it was first class, and it was live. I'm sure that's a tough endeavor. I don't know how many cameras you have shooting that shot, but bravo to WETC, and the overall delivery was amazing.
I was told, this is not a joke, I was told by sources at WETC that they actually got a complaint from a viewer that they were running the graduation too frequently. Now I joked back, that was true, and I joked, I said, maybe, well, that's a good sign that someone's actually watching WETC enough that they want to register an opinion. Maybe they were upset that this show was bumped for the high school graduation. I don't know.
I was the one who called, actually, and yes, I'd like to see.
They said they weren't running. No,
the graduation.
They said they were running it too
Yeah,
much. Correct.
I thought that was something.
That was you?
I thought it was one of the coolest things I've seen. As everybody's cruising through the channel, that particular morning to come across that ceremony.
Okay.
I thought it was fantastic.
How are we doing on questions?
Kudos.
This week,
I think
Jim?
we've got plenty. There's a lot going on in town, as we said. We'll get right into the questions, and I'm going to start off with a nice question from Johnny Stratt, who says, "Is there any way the lighting on the driveway could be aimed towards the asphalt as opposed to myself and neighbors' houses? Thank you very much." So I think he's talking about the street lights in
Where?
town. He doesn't identify his actual address, but he's suggesting that the lights are shining on his home and himself as opposed to on the asphalt. I'm not sure where that would occur. We get a lot of random questions here at Ask the Mayor.
Actually, in his headline, it does say the location. In the subject thing of
I'm
the
sorry,
email.
Cadman Place site lighting. Touche. Where is Cadman Place?
Is he talking about Cadman Towers or Cadman Place might be a road, right? If it is, I'm not familiar. I think
First
there's
I've
a
heard of
street
it.
Cadman Place, right? You can talk loud. It's okay.
Elderly housing up near.
No, I'm familiar with Cadman Towers, but is that where Cadman Place is?
I believe so.
Well, we'll check into that. I'll
Okay.
make sure we don't have a Cadman Place of a street, which I'm not familiar with, but I don't think we do. And if he is referring to Cadman Towers, we can talk to the Housing Authority, which, if it is Cadman Towers he's talking about, actually, did they change the name from Cadman Towers to Cadman Place after we did the work there some years ago? I need to check on that. What's the gentleman's name?
The man is Johnny Stratt.
Okay, so he needs to know too that the Weymouth Housing Authority administers that site, and it's autonomous, it's an authority. We don't have direct control over the Housing Authority. I do make appointments to the board, but they are autonomous. But we can work with Mr. Flaherty, the director, and see what we can do on that.
Stay tuned, Johnny Stratt. Stay tuned, as we say here at Ask the Mayor.
Johnny Stratt, we'll get back to you.
P.S.
Can I have that one so I don't forget?
Yeah, hold on to that one.
Excellent.
Put that
Thank you very
in
much.
the hot file.
This goes in the follow-up file, which is very small right now.
Well, listen, speaking of follow-up, it's not a particular question, but a concept that did get introduced at our last taping was the storage of the vehicles, automobile vehicles down at Southfield. At the time I said, or Union Point, at the time I said, gee, what's the big whoop? I happen to abut the property, as I know you know. There are more vehicles down there than I think anyone would ever expect to see. Is there a limit? My question would be, is there a limit on max capacity as far as how many cars can be stored down there? And there certainly seems to be a dramatic difference of opinion. There was a big article on the cover of the Ledger last week where that situation was referenced. Matt Barry, the CEO down there, called it a temporary situation, and then the spokeswoman from Volkswagen said it'll be at least 2 years. So temporary to me or short term is not defined by 2 years in my opinion, and it's all happening by my house. I hear the click, click, click of the delivery trucks happening, it seems like 24/7. Right. What's new and different down there, or what's happening as far as you know?
So it was brought to my attention by staff that we had a company come in seeking a building permit to do this. Building department held off. They came to me, we had legal look at it. As it turns out, our town bylaws, as we're discovering in lots of different areas, are kind of silent and vague on the topic of vehicle storage. As part of our zoning updates, we're updating certain bylaws. We are updating commercial car storage because we've run into this, ironically, at the same time. We have a couple of commercial car parking enterprises in town that don't comply with the zoning, and the bylaw is silent on what they can do. So that is getting corrected as part of our zoning changes that we are working on now. In fact, we did a segment on WETC with Planning Department Director Longo today to talk about that. We have a public meeting coming up on this very issue on our zoning changes information meeting on June 29th, 7 p.m. at the Weymouth High School Humanities Center. This is your chance, people, to weigh in. We have a lot of people go on social media or talk in the diners, in restaurants and bars, complaining about things as it relates to how Route 3A looks, how Route 53 looks, what kind of businesses we attract. We go into that in detail on a segment of development update here in WETC, and your chance to weigh in is coming up on the 29th of June, which some of the reruns of the show will have already occurred, but the meeting will have already occurred. But we had that part of this discussion. We learned that we couldn't stop it, and initially we wanted to give L-Star, you know, there's activities they're doing up there that provide them with short-term revenue as they complete permitting for projects and things like that. So we don't want to hamstring them too much, but we don't want the neighbors impacted. Most of that, almost all of that, most of that, it turns out, the storage is occurring in Rockland. Now, there have been some impacts to Weymouth residents. Blockage of the access from Union Street. We've asked them to correct that. That's being done. We've asked, residents have been bothered by the lighting. That seems to be the theme of this show. The way they set up the lighting, it's heading towards the neighborhood as opposed to back from the neighborhood facing the other way. We've asked them to move that. And now the town of Rockland, I know, just this week is getting involved somewhat, taking a look at it. Under the building department permit that we issued for the portion that's on Weymouth, we put certain conditions in that they are not to use Route 18. They are to exit Route 3 further south and come in the back way of the parkway. It's a $1,000 fine per violation. I myself have witnessed one violation.
You were quoted in that article, in fact.
A planning department member had witnessed another, so we're enforcing that. So that's the short of this. And of course, every time you flip on Facebook or social media, there's someone speculating that it's Dan Quirk storing cars or it's this or that. It's been debated and discussed ad nauseum. Obviously, some people don't watch the show. Some people don't read the Patriot Ledger. Some people don't read the Weymouth News. They keep asking the question, but it's Volkswagen of America through a subcontractor that is charged with and hired to move these things. They're being collected from the dealerships, and then they're being parceled out from there.
I thought it was...
And repurposed and repaired. And I was told initially that most of these are going to end up in South America.
Matt used the term short-term to describe the time.
One man's short term is another man's eternity.
Number
and
one.
I do not have a firm date yet. We're trying to get some clarity on that. I'm not sure that even Volkswagen of America has a firm time deadline. I think they got a general time frame.
She references 2 years.
And I have heard, I've heard up to 2 years. I don't know if that's going to be the case here or not yet. We will have more information on that forthcoming.
Yeah, I thought it was particularly disingenuous, though, by Mr. Barry to not reveal the people that have contracted to use the property. In that article specifically, he wouldn't reveal who that person was. And I'm not opposed. We live in America. I'm not opposed to them producing revenue on their property. But they position themselves as, we're here for the community. We're here to do good for the community. That's a massive eyesore.
The name of the company, which I'm not holding back on. I just can't remember the name of the company.
He wouldn't reveal it.
No, it's almost irrelevant. I mean, it's Volkswagen of America that has to do this and hired a transportation company. It's some transport company. That's who sought the building permit. It's a vendor to Volkswagen of America.
I'm a betting man. I'd like to bet you 50 cents that company is owned by L-Star in some form or fashion.
No, it's not.
All right.
I'll take that.
50 cents? There we go.
Absolutely.
It's on the record. Well, listen, let's move on. It's certainly something that's developing as an issue in town. And my question would be, what's next down there? Who in a million years would have thunk that they use that property to store vehicles? So what else is not protected by the town bylaws relative to, could there be a rodeo or an animal, a zoo down there? Who knows? I mean, I think they're going to continue to look for ways to generate revenue, as you said, for that property in any form or fashion. Again, I think it's all well and good, except for the fact that they've spent millions.
Let me preempt you because I know we want to get to questions.
We're here for good for the community.
You had 3 master developers there now, right?
Right, they're the third.
All of them have done short-term activities to provide revenue. I'm not defending this particular use, okay? In a perfect world, would I want it there? No. Would I rather see a commercial enterprise arising in that spot? Yeah. So all of them did things like renting space to driving schools and filming movies and all this short-term stuff, right? This is the first developer there that, in addition to doing that stuff, is actually making some concrete, firm movement to solid development. So we're cutting them a little bit of slack. And under our bylaws and under the master agreement that's embedded and codified in legislation, they have the right to do this. So that's the problem. That's the bottom line, is they have the right to do it. Now, can we impose conditions? Yes. Can we stop it from happening? No. Unless you want to go back and you want to revisit the legislation, the master legislation that they're operating under. So that's the reality.
Listen, I know we want to move on, but that legislation was ripped into 1,000 pieces. The original agreement that was negotiated for a 10-year period with the federal government has been ripped to shreds in lieu to accommodate this L-Star residential phenomenon that's, devouring the city.
It wasn't ripped to shreds. It was, we'll do another topic on that. But no, we took a failed model and changed the legislation that was approved by the town council, the former mayor, and the Massachusetts legislature to create more flexibility for a company to actually get some commercial development and have a realistic plan that relates to the current market conditions.
And all that is basically defined as we've thrown the commercial plan onto a stall mode and it's become a residential bonanza down there. And that's the big change.
Look, we're going to devote the whole show now, Mr. Inquisitor, to this topic. If I had a magic wand and they had a magic wand and you had a magic wand, I'd say, boom, let's have ProDrive. let's have, the reality is they have demand from businesses that want to construct housing based on demand. And you don't have demand right now for office parks and biotech. They're doing the best they can. And we've worked our butts off to make ProDrive a reality.
Well, I know you
Who
inherited
will be,
this.
if it happens, the town's largest taxpayer. So, it's not a perfect world, Jim.
And I know you inherited all this. I mean, all these changes were made before you even were elected.
Right.
But the worm has turned for sure. I don't know if it's better or worse.
Just be thankful Starwood is not the master developer anymore.
Well, I'll have to take you for your word on that one. I don't know all the ins and outs with those guys, but right now I'm looking at a used parking lot behind my house, and it's the temporary word has been redefined on 1,000 levels. We'll keep a close eye on it. How about we agree to do that?
We're all over it. I mean, and we're working with Rockland now. I mean, they have an interest in it suddenly, which they should.
Yeah.
So.
Well, as we started off the show, lots going on in this town, and that's a big part of it, needless to say. So we'll keep. I'll keep inquiring.
How are we doing on the questions for this segment?
We're moving right along. By the way, P.S. keep those questions coming to AskMayorBob@gmail.com, or your Facebook pages.
Bob Hedlund Mayor.
Bob Hedlund Mayor. There you go. Keep the questions coming, because we do have some that people have actually written in, not my barbs I'm throwing your way. Dear Mayor, there's a ton of road work going on around town, and I did not purposely segue to this question. What is going on at Weymouth's most dangerous intersection? New turning lanes? I don't know if is he defined. Looking forward to the detours and traffic delays to end soon. When do you think this intersection will be functioning correctly? And can citizen advocate / inquisitor Jim Melody name the most dangerous intersection in town? Geez, they don't identify it. I'm going to say Columbian Square. The most dangerous intersection in town. I would say
that's the most frustrating.
Yeah, I don't think I could. My knee-jerk reaction is I don't think there was the most dangerous intersection in town. What's your thought?
Well, I think the most dangerous intersection in town had been addressed by the state, so I'm not exactly sure, given the context of the question, but I can tell you 2 of the more dangerous intersections in town are being worked on. Actually 3.
Can you name street names or intersections?
Yeah, so there's, as you know, construction going on at Libby and Middle. That's nearing completion. That's being signalized. There were no signals there before.
Dangerous?
That's a very dangerous
Okay.
intersection. A lot of accidents there. So that's nearing completion. The other end of Libby is scheduled later. That's part of the mitigation that the Bristol brothers are paying for due to the work at the top of Arbor Hill.
Love the Bristol. I'm going to interrupt you if you don't mind, because up by where I grew up and where you formerly had your home, how about where Broad Street and is it Middle Street intersect? Where Academy Ave is, and where because there's certainly been a series of accidents there through the years. Down the street here, for heaven's sakes.
No.
It's not that, okay?
No.
Jeez.
That's probably not in the top 20.
Oh, no, okay. I just, as a guy who grew up there, you'd hear, cars banging, occasionally.
So in answer to your original question, before you interrupted me, which seems to be a theme in this show.
We're feisty. There's a feisty show.
He's just mad because he had 7 minutes of his time cut out by Mary Heinrichs.
I'm honored.
There's work underway at Washington and Mutton and Washington and Pleasant. And to me, as I travel around town, it might not be the most dangerous, but I think it's in the top. That intersection is very frustrating if I'm leaving my current home to try to go left onto Washington Street. So we are creating, and the state is working with us on this, and they're funding it, is dedicated turn signals. So you'll get a green arrow, and that should help the traffic flow at both of those intersections. And the best part too is that those 2 intersections will be, the sequencing will be coordinated. So if you're traveling on Washington, you hit the other one and then you go 20 yards and boom, you hit the next one. It can be frustrating. And the one at Mutton's kind of long, so that's getting tweaked also.
Well, that should be good.
In addition to that, handicap access sidewalks, new sidewalks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And you may recall, as a follow-up to a question John Reddish sent in 2 or 3 months ago, wondering why the lights aren't more synchronized. That is a goal of the traffic department.
But we actually could go on at length. There's other intersection work, other road safety improvements. We should do an entire Mayor's Monthly Forum on it. Washington and Broad, we're getting close on that. We are hoping for a Complete Streets grant, our second one, that create some safety improvements, pedestrian signalization, different places, those flashing pedestrian crossing lights that are new now, that stuff will be happening, etc.
All right, well, listen, we're almost out of time, if you can believe it. The time has flown very
Fastest
quickly here
half
today.
hour in television.
And we're
When the
moving
citizen
quickly.
inquisitor comes in feisty. Notice how animated he gets, folks. He's supposed to be on your side. He's supposed to be the citizen inquisitor, but he consumed most of the show with a personal
I think
matter
this affects all of us,
impacting his
Southfield.
backyard.
It's private property. The state's investing an awful lot of money down there. It's from that Delahunt connector on down. That's all of our concern at the end of the day, if you're asking me. But what do I know as the Inquisitor? I'm going to try to fire one off quickly, Mayor, before we wrap up this edition of Ask the Mayor. Once again, please send those questions to askmayorbob@gmail.com. Dear Mayor, now that Brewster Ambulance is in town, what is the likelihood that Fallon Ambulance will continue to be Weymouth's provider? Do you believe that Brewster purposely cited their new building in the hopes that Weymouth would give them a new contract? Signed, a humble resident. Really exciting. We saw you actually in the press with you at the opening ceremony down there at Brewster. Looks like $1 million.
A humble resident. That's a good
Somebody,
one.
do we have those in Weymouth?
That's a good one.
So that disqualifies me.
Humble resident. A humble resident is Mr. X's cousin.
Oh, hey now.
So I think it's highly unlikely. I can't answer the question, but he says, do I believe? No, I don't believe that Brewster purposely located their facility in Weymouth in order to get the contract with Weymouth. And if you recall, at the time, Brewster owned the land for quite some time. Brewster owned the land prior to my taking office.
The old Ricky Smith site, right?
Right.
Yeah.
18 and 53. I think what attracted Brewster to the site was the type of use it had been, the zoning, and the fact.
Proximity to the highway, right?
Bingo.
Yeah.
Proximity to the highway and their marketing area and their service area. So I think that drove that consideration. The likelihood Fallon will continue to be Weymouth's provider, I can't speak to that. I can tell you that the town has not competitively bid this service in over a decade.
Can you talk about that process real quick? Do you decide? Is there a committee that decides? Who picks? How do we decide who's our ambulance provider?
Under the state procurement laws, this is something that is not required to be bid under 30B, I guess. There's some wiggle room on behalf of the town, but the bottom line is that they were operating under a contract initially issued at some point in the past. I won't go through the whole sequence of who the providers were, but there was a 2-year extension given to Fallon in December of the previous administration before I took office in January. And our position has been that we think that if you look at what has occurred in other communities around the state of similar size, and we've also examined a fire-based EMS, which when we put this RFP out, which we're working on, which should go out soon, and in other words, we're competitively bidding our ambulance contract, part of the consideration is, the opportunity within that contract to move towards a fire-based EMS system if it proves to be viable. So we think that there's a much better service that can be provided both service-wise and financially to the town of Weymouth by creating a competitive bid situation, which we haven't had in over a decade. So it could be Brewster, it could be Fallon, and then as a little tease here and a little scoop, we had a meeting yesterday with an entity that approached us that expressed their interest in being in the mix.
Wow.
So it'll create a competitive situation, and I think we'll wind up with better service and more benefits to the town of Weymouth than we currently enjoy. And that's not an indictment of the current provider. They've done a great job. They're invested in the community. They participate in community events. They help us out with a lot of stuff.
Peter Rascott, one of the top dogs over at Fallon, lives in Weymouth, as a matter of fact.
Would he be the humble resident?
Perhaps we'll have to sign up our Ask the Mayor investigative squad.
Joking.
Well, listen, looks like we're wrapping this episode up of Ask the Mayor. Once again, we thank Mayor Bob Hedlund for his time and energy. Of course, the great Mary Heinrichs from Weymouth DTC, who sat in here in my stead, and I apologize for running a little late. We've got to slow the wheels of progress here in Weymouth. But we remind everybody to send the questions to askmayorbob@gmail.com, and stay tuned for the Brady Bunch.
Oh, Green Acres.
Green Acres.
And there's a reason for that. We'll talk about it in the next show.
Da-da-da-da-da.
If you you have a question, please email the mayor at askmayorbob@gmail.com. That's askmayorbob@gmail.com. Maybe your question will be answered on the next episode of Ask the Mayor.
Green Acres is the place to be. Farm living is the life for me. Land spreading out so far and wide. Keep Manhattan, just give me that countryside.